Hey Gearheads, and welcome to GT Garage Talk. I am your host Cory, and this week we have a very fun and very interesting and slightly nerdy episode for you. Those of you who have known and followed GT Garage Talk for any length of time know that I spent nearly 12 years as an analyst, and numbers are kind of my thing. So today's guest ties my numbers background with my love of cars into like the perfect conversation to where I could have gone on and on and on and on and on about so many different topics. But unfortunately, I couldn't. And our guest this week is the president, the CEO, the owner of AutoPacific, Ed Kim. And I will let him go into all the details of exactly what AutoPacific is, what they do, and you, if you know me at all, will start to see the connections of just how geeked I was to get to talk to Ed today. So let's bring him on. I thank Ed Kim for joining us today to talk a little bit of his car history and maybe a little nerdy analytics along the way. Ed, nice to have you.
Hey, thanks for having me. This is awesome.
So before we just completely jump into the weeds and nerd out on car numbers, facts, and figures, I wanted to get to know you just a little bit. Your current position has changed slightly. Why don't you give our Gearhead listeners just a little idea of what it is that you do?
Okay, so again, I'm Ed Kim, and I am now the new president and chief analyst at AutoPacific. I came into this position, let's see, 11 days ago, January 1st. So it's it's been a lot of fun, trying to make adjustments and to the company and do things a little differently and just basically plan out what we're going to be doing for 2022 and beyond. But basically, Auto Pacific is a well-respected automotive market research and consulting firm. It was founded 36 years ago in 1986.
Very
Is that the
important
year?
year in my life, so I had to celebrate
Hey,
just a little bit.
yeah, so it was formed in 1986 by George Peterson, who was the president and owner of the company until January 1st. So it's an incredibly long and storied legacy that I'm taking over from. So I thank him very much for entrusting the company and its reputation and legacy with me. Basically, throughout the years, Auto Pacific has done quite a few different, has had a variety of products and services to mainly help the OEMs, the automakers, as well as suppliers and even ad agencies to make the best decisions for future products. So, for example, let's say an automaker is developing their next, let's say, full size pickup truck, and they're in the early planning phases of it. Well, one of the things that an automaker might do at that point is contact an automotive research company like Auto Pacific and do some early consumer research. Find out what it is that consumers want in their next vehicles. What do they want in their next truck? And why? Why is that important to them? That sort of research, I would say, is even more important and relevant now than ever with all the huge changes that are happening in our business right now. Right now we're looking down the barrel of electrification, of autonomous drive features, more and more infotainment technology that's going into vehicles. There's just so much technology-wise that's happening in the automotive space that the sort of choices that consumers are going to be faced with in the coming years is just going to be staggering. And it's important for automakers to understand as they're as they're going into this brave new world. Well, what is it that the consumer is going to want? Ultimately, an automaker can come up with all kinds of great ideas and dreams and whatnot, but they're going to be useless if they don't meet an actual
Right.
customer demand. So that's where we come in and perform various types of research projects to really help the automakers and suppliers as well, because a lot of the cool ideas that you see in cars today actually came from the supplier side, where the supplier actually pitches an idea. Hey, we've got this cool interior functionality idea that we've designed for pickup trucks, and they'll pitch that idea, to the automakers. So a lot of those innovations you see, come from both the automakers as well as the supplier side. So we really do work with both in helping both automakers and suppliers to develop products and ideas that meet an actual customer demand. So it's a ton of fun. It's super interesting. For a car nerd, lifelong car nerd like myself. I mean, or yourself. What could possibly be more fun than helping an automaker determine,
The
what they should
future.
yeah, what they should build in the future based on what consumers are saying that what consumers are reporting as what, some of their unmet needs or things that they'd want to see in their next vehicle and all that sort of stuff. So yeah, it's kind of a car nerd's dream. Now the other
Yes.
side of auto,
So
the other,
you and
yeah, go
I
ahead.
spoke leading up to this interview. I spent 12 years in analytics on the grocery retail side. So
Yeah, that's
being
right.
able to combine what I did for 12 years and my love of automobiles, like you're speaking my language wholeheartedly. I'm like, oh my gosh, that just sounds so awesome. So that's great. But sorry, I cut you off. What is?
Oh no, no. So that's one half of Auto Pacific's business. The other side of Auto Pacific is what we call industry analysis, and that's actually the side of the company that I was in charge of until January 1st, where then I became in charge of everything. But the industry analysis side, what we basically our main the main two functions that we have there are competitive intelligence. So basically, that's where our team of industry analysts are looking out into the future and trying to figure out what's going to happen with every single new vehicle that's sold in the marketplace. We have a web portal called eautopacific.com that's basically how you interface with all this data. And basically what we provide in there is all the intel we have on future brands, future segments, future vehicles. If you want to, if you're an automotive product planner working for company X, and you want to find out what your nearest competitor is doing in the future on their competitive vehicle, our competitive intelligence tool will show them everything that we know about the next, whatever this vehicle is, the next Honda Accord or the next, Toyota RAV4. So basically, me and my team and I, we spend a lot of our time chasing down intel. Some of that intel, comes from stuff we read on the internet, of course, but a lot of it also is talking to automakers, talking to suppliers. We've built up a pretty strong intelligence network, and that helps us, sort of hypothesize about what we think is going to happen with every vehicle nameplate that's sold here in the U.S. market. The other side of what the industry analysis part of Auto Pacific does is sales forecasting. So, automakers, in planning for, how many of vehicle X that they should build, what kind of demand is out there for, this vehicle that's in this segment, and understanding what kind of volumes their competitors might do. Well, that sales forecast really helps them out there. They can see, where we're predicting the market size to be, both for the overall market, the overall U.S. market, as well as individual brands, all the way down to the individual vehicles and their, if applicable, alternative powertrains. Electric, plug-in hybrid, hydrogen, all that sort of stuff. Because that's a big thing on automakers' minds these days. So we do have this. What I'd like to think is a very, very good and accurate forecast. So that ties in very closely with our competitive intelligence. In turn, our forecast is also informed partly by the data that we do, the data that we get from new vehicle buyers. One of our longtime products on the market research side is our annual new vehicle satisfaction study, and with that, we send questionnaires to new vehicle owners, and they tell us what they like and don't like, and what they'd like to see in the future, and all that in survey form. That data generates very, very useful insights as to what people are thinking about, what people in various vehicle segments might be thinking about, what brands they'll consider in the future, what segments they'll consider in the future, and all that sort of stuff. And that directly informs our forecast, which I think is a unique advantage that we have over some other forecasters that
interface with the consumer as directly.
yeah, exactly. So yeah, that's basically what we do at AutoPacific. So
So
yeah, I mean, again,
you,
for a car guy, totally geeky fun.
yes, you've probably had a very interesting last couple of years on your old desk and the forecasting and all of that with chip shortages and
Oh my
plant
gosh, yes.
closures. I'm sure you're absolutely tired of talking about chips, right?
Well, no, I'm not tired about talking about chips just because it's like one of the big it's like one of the hugest foremost issues in our business right now. I mean, if it wasn't for this chip shortage, the industry would be selling a lot more vehicles because the natural demand right now for new vehicles is a lot higher than what the supply is, and the
Right.
reason that supply is so low is because there's no chips. So this last couple of years has just really highlighted just how much a disruption in the supply chain can
Right.
completely screw up an industry. Basically, send everyone scrambling and trying to figure out what are we going to do now? Got consumers that want to buy our cars, but we don't have the parts to build these
Right.
cars. It's leading a lot of automakers to really rethink their own supply chains to prevent things like this from happening again in the future, because the automakers have lost out on a lot of revenue over the last couple of years due to the chip shortage, which ultimately traces back to the whole pandemic. So really since 2020, this is supply chain issues have given the industry a lot to think about, especially in the context of preventing it from happening again in the way that it has.
You've even got legacy brands rethinking their go to market strategy. So Ford has been
Oh yeah,
rumored of talking about leaning a little more heavily into this Tesla style build to order kind of
yes,
system, which would be a total disruptor. But for me, on the review slash test drive side of things, I'm like, this could be good because people will be more dependent on reviews and the internet research. So I'm
right,
like, go ahead.
yeah, absolutely. I mean, um, we've been through our surveys, we've been tracking for years, how consumers get their information when they're shopping for vehicles, and over the last decade especially, the degree to which consumers really rely on all the various internet resources out there, including review sites, including people like help them narrow down and decide what they're going to buy. The role of outlets like yours have become far more prevalent and important to consumers. So in that sense, you're doing a great service, and keep it up.
I'm only out there to help. So I did promise that this wouldn't be very heavy on analytics or begging you for details or scoops on what it is that you do. I wanted to pivot and kind of stay true to our form and find out a little more what makes you tick. How did you end up the president of AutoPacific? What got you down the road of the automotive industry?
Well, I guess without making this too long and lengthy, the Cliff Notes version basically starts with me as a small child. As is the case for so many of us in our industry. It
Start him young.
you start out as a childhood car geek, and that's what I was. My parents love to tell the story about how my motivation to learn to read was this giant coffee table book that they had in the living room. That was it was a book that was about this thick. It was massive, and it was this basically huge almanac of every vehicle sold in the entire world. I mean,
Oh
I don't even know if
goodness.
we have a resource like that today. Like one book where, I mean, literally you could see everything that was on sale in Turkey or Sudan, or it was just it was incredible how comprehensive this book was. Again, I don't even know that there's a resource on the internet today that can get you all that in one place.
Wikipedia, maybe?
Wikipedia maybe, but it's not fact checked in the way that this book was.
Right.
The thing about the book was there were a bunch of articles in the front of the book, and years and years later, I went back and read some of them and realized the write-ups were written by iconic auto writers of that era. This book had some credibility in the sense that it was really first-tier auto writers of that time period that contributed to it. But I digress. My motivation for learning to read, as my parents like to tell it, was that I wanted to know everything about every single car in that book, and that was my motivation to learn to read. So not long after that, I'd be the little kid in the backseat, naming every car that we drive by, and it got to the point where I was kind of, for like a 5-year-old, I knew more than most 5-year-olds about what that car was and that car
That's
was
awesome.
and all that. My Matchbox and Hot Wheels collection was epic, and all that stuff. That love of cars never left. Now in high school, I had dreams of being a car designer, but for a variety of reasons that I won't get into right now, I ended up to decide to sort of follow in many of my family members' footsteps and go into psychology. So I graduated from college as a psych major and went to work as a counselor at a teenage boys group home. So I did that for a while. Totally not automotive, of course. In the meantime, though, in the background, what I was doing outside of work was wrenching away on my car, going to SCCA Solo 2 autocrosses on weekends, and
Right.
testing out my latest chassis enhancements, on the course and all that. So while I had my 9 to 5, my passions were clearly elsewhere. After a couple of years doing what I was doing at work, I decided, you know, it's important work that I'm doing here, but this isn't where my passion
Right.
lies, and I gotta follow my heart. So I quit that job just to get me into an environment where there were a lot of cars around. I ended up working for Hertz Rent a Car, and because I was like, well, there's like no shortage of cars here, and in that role, I'll get to drive
Right.
these cars around. Oh my gosh, I'm gonna get to drive like all the new cars. So I was like, all right, I'm gonna, I don't really know my path into the auto industry yet, but this is where I'm gonna start. Eventually, through a lot of luck and generosity of mentors, I found my way to AutoPacific. It was just one of those things where the timing kind of lined up. Everything was the stars were aligned for me to get a position there, and I was hired without, I had no formal auto industry experience, just a lot of armchair car guy knowledge and passion. But
You can't
apparently that
teach
was
the passion. You can teach all the other skills, but you can't teach the
absolutely.
passion.
Yeah, and I think that's what George Peterson, the founder of the company, saw in me when I was hired. Obviously, I was inexperienced, but I had the passion, and he this was back in '98. So he took me under his wing. I was very, very the thing that one of the things I'll be so eternally grateful to him for is the fact that he immediately just kind of threw me to the wolves, and he put huge responsibilities on me, where that I was like, gosh, I can't believe he's trusting me to do this. I just started. But that's how I learned, and that's how I learned about automotive market research. Just basically getting thrown right into the middle of a project, and given important roles in these projects, even though I didn't really know what I was doing at the time. But I'm sure you found in your life too. I mean, sometimes the best way to learn to
Jump
learn a
in the
skill,
deep end.
jump in the deep end. Just go, just go all in. I'm very fortunate that George, trusted me enough to throw me in the deep end and just have me sort it out. I had a tremendous time. I did so I've been at the company since '98, but I did have one detour. I left in 2004 to work in product planning at Hyundai.
Okay.
So I did that. I did that for 4 years. I was in their advanced product development area, which I thought was the most fun area of product planning. That's the area where our team would try to identify white spaces in the market. There's this customer type who's really not being served by well served by the vehicles in market. How do we develop what kind of a car do we need to develop in that segment that would really speak to this type of buyers, under this type of buyers unmet needs. we came up with all kinds of really fun and cool product ideas, some of which actually did make it into production. I'm definitely proud of the fact that our team had a big role in what became the 2011 Hyundai Sonata. That was really arguably the car that got Hyundai out of like the second tier
Yeah.
budget car place that it had been since it launched, into up to the next level where it was being compared favorably against Camrys and Accords and all that.
It was a
And
huge statement for the brand.
it was. I mean, at that time, there was not another midsize sedan that looked like that. I remember the first time I got one as a press car. I'll never forget this. I had to run a quick errand. Went to Target, pulled into a Target parking lot, went in, came back out to the car, and there was a flyer under the windshield from some local Mercedes service center. Apparently, someone put this flyer under the car, thinking that the car was a Mercedes. And so when I saw it, I looked at the other cars in the lot. I was like, okay, did someone just stick this
Canvas.
flyer under all the under all the windshield wipers? No, it was just the Mercedes cars in the parking lot plus this Hyundai Sonata. So, and I was like, wow, if that doesn't demonstrate right there just how radically new and different and impressive this new Sonata is, I don't know what is. Anyway, so our team definitely had a big hand in that product, and it was a ton of fun to not just do the research on consumers, but also then help develop the car to meet that consumer's need. And so it was a ton of fun. I returned to AutoPacific back in 2008 as George reached out to me and said, "Hey,
Gotta have you back.
would love to have you back and lead our industry analysis area." So that's what I did all the way up from that point up until January 1st when the keys were handed over to me, and now I'm in charge of the company. But I do want to say though that despite all that, I remain first and foremost a car guy and a car analyst first. I mean, yes, I'm now running the day-to-day operations of the business, but first and foremost, I'm an analyst first. I'm a car guy first. That's where my passions are and always will be.
What was it like kind of getting to see the industry from both sides? Because the team you work for at Hyundai is essentially who you worked with coming back to Auto Pacific, correct?
Absolutely, yes, yes. So I've got a very long history with Hyundai on both sides because Hyundai is a longtime client of AutoPacific's. We were working with Hyundai even back, when I first started with the company in '98. I've definitely been on both sides. For both roles, being at Hyundai and being at AutoPacific, the experience of being on the other side has been tremendously valuable. It wasn't until I went to Hyundai that I really understood, what it is that product planners really need and what sort of tools they really need. And so when I came back to Auto Pacific, I was able to adjust a lot of our product offerings to meet the needs of the client better because now I had that experience of actually being a product planner, and I knew the sort of tools I needed, and some of the things that I wish existed. And I was like, and so coming back to Auto Pacific, it's like, okay, hey, as someone who was just a product planner, we should do this because
Right.
product planners are underserved in this area. On the other end of it, having the market research and analyst background before I went to Hyundai was tremendously valuable as a product planner because I understood how research worked. I really understood research design. I really understood how to design and develop research that would help answer the questions that we were trying to answer. So yeah, I think being on both sides, on both the OEM side and the market research and consulting side, have been tremendously valuable.
What would you say is a little bit of an Ed Kim stamp on the automotive landscape outside of that Sonata that you can say you can look at and just say I helped with that, or I helped pave the way for X, Y, or Z.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I guess I would say the vehicle that probably has the most number of my fingerprints on it would be the second generation Tucson. The second generation, if you recall, the first generation Tucson was sort of this, it was sort of a more upright, kind of a blocky SUV sort of a look. Ironically, I think that look would actually sort of work, well today, because everyone now today everyone
It's
wants,
desirable.
more rugged looking SUVs. But at that time, SUVs were really kind of starting to transform and morph into sleeker designs, more aerodynamic designs. And so that second generation Tucson was at that time really trying to answer that consumer need at the time for a more sporty, a more on-road oriented look for a crossover SUV. We sort of had this internal competition at Hyundai, where a few teams were formed, and we did all this work and research to each come up with a product concept, an idea that one would get chosen and move forward and ultimately become the production car. So the team I led, we came up with what we nicknamed Urban Cruiser. It was sort of it was an idea for an SUV that was a lot more sleek. That's why we called it urban. It's not off road, but it's more of a city car. Everything from the exterior styling to the interior, and a lot of the feature content that went into it directly came from the early concept work that my team and I had developed. So yeah, I would say that one in particular, because it was me and my team's concept that was chosen to move forward. I would say, yeah, that one is probably the one that has the most Edkin fingerprints on it.
So I have to ask, and you might cringe when I do this, but listening to you describe the process reminds me so much of the much maligned Pontiac Aztec. It is
Ah,
well documented now that within General Motors, the Aztec checked all the boxes. It was ahead of schedule, it met all the criteria, it was a slam dunk internally that, when released to the public, just went over like a lead balloon. What
yes.
are your thoughts and opinions, given your unique background in both the consumer research side and the automotive planning side? What are your thoughts on the much maligned Pontiac Aztec?
Oh, yes, I have opinions on that for sure, especially coming from my background. So, yes, it's true. The car researched well. The idea researched well. And if you think about the product, the concept behind that idea, it was for a very roomy, very package focused,
Right.
super expressive yet multifunctional practical vehicle. And if you think about that idea, I mean, that's really what crossovers have evolved into. I mean,
Yep.
they're multifunctional. They're stylish. They have the better ones have great attitude and style and all that. The problem, what went wrong with Aztec wasn't the basic idea of the car, because yes, it actually did perform very well in research, and GM's research at the time definitively proved, yes, there is absolutely a market for this type of vehicle. The problem was the General Motors at that time it was a very different GM than now. It was a time when the bean counters basically ruled the company, and what basically happened was, they took this very well researched and very legitimate idea, and then the bean counters basically ordered it to be built on the platform of the GM U van of the time. So it used the GM U van, and for those of you who don't know, the U van being the Chevrolet,
Uplander,
Uplander, the Pontiac Transport,
Buick,
Buick Ranger, or no, yeah, it was they had what
uh,
was the Ranger?
something Terraza.
Terraza, yes,
Yes.
thank you, Terraza. So the bean counters insisted that this very cool concept and idea be built on the bones of the GM minivan of the time. So the proportions were all wrong. It had these little tiny minivan tires and wheels, on this big bloated body. The cowl height was defined by where it was in the minivan product. The overhangs were defined by the platform, by that minivan platform, and basically they took this really sound idea and applied it onto really unsuitable hardware that completely destroyed the car's proportions and made it look stupid. And that's why the car, so, performed like a lead balloon in the
Right.
marketplace. I would say that perhaps the biggest proof that the idea itself wasn't that the idea itself was a solid one was the success of the Honda Element. I mean, it's a very similar idea, maybe on a little bit of a smaller package, but the idea was fundamentally similar. It's a unibody crossover with funky and unique styling and a super multifunctional interior meant for getting dirty and all that sort of stuff. I mean, that was the idea behind Aztec too. But in Honda's case, that element was distantly related to the Civic and CRV of the time.
Right.
Yet it looked nothing like it. It didn't have the hard points of a Civic or CRV. Honda went and accepted the expense of making bigger changes to that platform to keep the product truer to the basic idea that the planners had come up with in the first place. So
What's the
yeah,
phrase?
so
You got to spend
that's my
money to
thought.
make money.
Yeah, that's yes. Sometimes you do. Sometimes you do. Honda spent the money. The GM bean counters, unfortunately, did not, and hence we got the Aztec.
That's a unique comparison too, because both historically had a lot of black exterior cladding, which many cited was the downfall of the Aztec. It just lent to the funky styling. Yet, to your point, the Element did so well.
Yeah, it did. I mean, that had just as much black plastic cladding as the Aztec. It maybe more even, but it was done in a way that made it look kind of cool and rugged. On the Aztec, personally, I think the basic hard points and proportions of the car of the Aztec made it such that there was no fixing it. I mean, no amount of cladding or styling details were going to fix what was fundamentally wrong with the proportions.
Right.
So,
Yeah, I remember the first concept drawings of it, and it was much sleeker, much more
mhm.
rugged, youthful, just a totally different vehicle than what we got. And
Yeah, yeah,
like you said, it all comes down to the minivan bones of it. It just,
right. Right. I remember some of those earlier drawings too. In fact, yeah, a couple of years before the production Aztec came out, GM or Pontiac did put out a concept car, an Aztec concept car that showed the basic idea, and that concept had much bigger wheels and tires. It wasn't constrained by those minivan proportions. That original Aztec concept shows you what the designers and product planners had in mind, and then once it got adapted to those minivan bones, it all went to trash. So,
you know, many people in my industry joke about, yeah, you can show us concepts all you want, but if you can't deliver on those concepts, what good is it? And
right,
GM
right.
of the era was especially guilty, but then coming out of bankruptcy and reformation, I remember as a huge Camaro fan seeing the
Mhm.
Camaro concept, and I was like, please, please, please make it just like that. And
Yeah,
they did. It was
they did.
very true to form, and so much so that I went out and bought a 2012. So, uh,
Right,
yes, I see how far GM has come, and that's why I kind of leaned back into my love of the brand.
right. Yeah, I mean, I think the case can really be made that the bankruptcy in the end was really good for GM. I mean, it really ushered in a some huge culture changes at the company that resulted in just vastly improved product. I mean, the products that the post bankruptcy products from GM are so different from
Right.
the pre bankruptcy products in terms of quality and execution and even proportions. I mean, GM used to be the king of adapting various vehicles to pretty uninspiring
Right.
platforms. There was a time, like particularly in the '90s. I remember GM front wheel drive vehicles always had these massively long overhangs, like way more for some reason, even more so than other competitive vehicles. They would have these super long schnozzes and kind of ungainly proportions. And Aztec, of course, was the arguably the biggest offender. But
You remember
uh,
the Oldsmobile Aurora?
I do remember the
Oh,
Oldsmobile Aurora.
and and even I believe it shared a platform with the Buick Riviera. Both of those were
It did.
very long, large. To your point, overhangs. And yeah,
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
funky. You could see where they were going with it,
You
but
could,
it
you
just
could,
didn't
especially with the
translate.
Riviera. Like with the Riviera, it's like that's one of the designs that kind of came close to being really good, but again, I think platform constraints, were a factor in
Final product.
yeah, in the final product. So,
All right, one last question before we dig into our random misfire questions to
all
close it
right,
out. I can't help myself. We've drifted into GM territory, and we are, as we sit down to record this on the 11th of January, on the heels of a massive announcement from General Motors with a tease of more to come in the EV market. So we have gotten Silverado EV
yep,
pictures, videos, specs, and we're teased with Equinox EV, which is actually going to come out before, and
right.
even Blazer EV. So, from your vantage point, without spilling any, trade secrets or anything, what are your thoughts on this current direction of EV focus for the General Motors brand?
Well, it is this goes back to the old GM versus new GM discussion where the and it really shows the cultural change at GM. I mean, prior to the bankruptcy, I mean, GM was in many ways, kind of perceived to be, fighting the future. EVs don't make money. We're not going to do that. All this sort of stuff.
The GM
Even
EV1, like,
yeah, even though they were pioneers, really. I mean, the EV1 was the first, sort of mass-produced EV. It definitely had its fans. I mean, it was a niche car, but it definitely had its fans and it got a lot of visibility. The GM of the past was really focused on. I would say the biggest difference is GM of the past was very focused on short term profitability, short-term gains. It often seemed like they really couldn't look past the next quarter. The next quarter. GM today is very different. I mean, prior to
almost to their detriment, because it seems like their current product offerings are being neglected in the
it,
vein of the future.
yeah, there's definitely a transition happening. But I think what's really striking here overall, though, is that we've got we've gone from GM thinking very short-term focused to now GM being all about long-range thinking. I mean, in my career, GM has until recently I went through most of my life never thinking of GM as a particularly forward-thinking company where they're really looking out into the future and trying to figure out how GM and its brands fit into this future landscape. But that's what GM is doing now. I mean, they are truly focused on an electric future, and yeah, in some ways, I think there could be legitimate arguments made that maybe they're moving a little too quickly, but at the same time, fortune has often favored those who make bold decisions and bold investments like that. So I think it's obviously way too early to predict GM's long-term success in the EV field, but the fact that they're so invested into it, so boldly saying this is where we're
Yeah.
going. I mean, it's surprising, in some ways shocking, no pun intended, but but uh, but just absolutely fascinating. And it's from an analyst perspective, I mean, they're one of the most interesting companies to watch right now
Yeah.
because for such a huge company to embrace electrification in the way that they have, it's pretty striking.
Yeah.
So we'll see how it all turns out.
I could keep talking to you for hours on end, but I want to be respectful of your time. I know you've got work to get back to. So we will close out today's episode with a little segment we call Random Misfire. It's
Okay.
8 questions. They're super fun. They're this or that or your preference. And just to help us get to know you a little bit better and dive into that brain of yours as we talk about cars. So I've got a long list that I'm actually going to have to do my best to find the 8 most interesting questions. I'll start with my favorite. It's my go-to. Do you name your vehicles?
I'm sorry. Do I what?
Do you name your vehicles?
Do I name my vehicles? Interesting question. I used to, but I don't. No, I guess our current two cars, we don't have names for them. What one of the cars is a 2020 Subaru Outback. Love the car, but
Hmm.
don't have a name for it. The other car, which is actually my daily driver, is a 1983 Mercedes 300D,
Oh, that car
and
needs a name. That car needs a name bad.
it needs a name, a good proper German name, a good Swabian name,
Yes.
preferably. But no, I have not named the car, which is weird because I've had the car for over 3 years. I love the car. I drive it daily, but so no, I don't have names for my cars.
I'm sure that Benz has quite a bit of personality to it as
It
well.
does. It does. Maybe I just haven't found the right name befitting that car's you know 38 years driving on the roads.
Yeah. All right. So I see your classic GTI shirt. What car, I'm going to tweak this question a little bit. What car would you say has been most influential in your life?
Well, it is it would definitely be, I would definitely say the Volkswagen Golf. And it's funny that I happen to be wearing this shirt, but I would have to actually say definitely Volkswagen Golf. So I told the story of when I was a little kid and obsessed with cars. But as a 4 or 5 year old kid, for some reason, the car that I just loved so much was the Volkswagen Rabbit. Now, the word for rabbit in Korean is toki. So I would always yell at my parents, look, it's a Volkswagen Toki, a Volkswagen Toki. I think it was because the logo of the first gen Rabbit, there was the word rabbit, but there was a little picture of a running rabbit, like next to the words, and so I called it the Volkswagen Toki. Anyways, for some reason I was obsessed with the rabbit slash golf as a kid. I remember going to the LA Auto Show as a kid, and my parents would just leave me in the Volkswagen stand while they'd go look at the other cars, because I really didn't want to see anything else. I just wanted to sit in that rabbit and imagine that it was ours. God, I remember trying to convince my parents we should get a rabbit. We should get a rabbit. I don't know why I liked the thing so much, but I was obsessed with it. Anyways, then as an adult, you know, I've owned multiple varieties of golf and golf derivatives, namely the Jetta. So the number of golfs and Jettas I've had throughout the years is high. It's significant. I guess as an adult, the thing I've always appreciated about golfs is that they really do possess a very they've traditionally driven like a much higher end car than their price point would suggest. Everything from the way that the chassis is tuned, the steering is tuned, especially the interior materials and finishes and all that sort of stuff, the paint quality. It all, for, most generations of golf have been kind of elevated above, the competing Corollas and Civics and
Mhm.
whatnot in those areas. And, I think I always just as an adult, that's one of my favorite things about those cars. But yeah, that childhood love of the Golf and all of its various cousins, that's been kind of a lifetime thing for me.
All right. Very iconic car in its own right, and has had its share of outstanding styling to bland, but
Yeah,
yeah.
it's gone in many ways. I do have to ask. I've got to turn this question back on you though. What is your most influential car?
Chevy Camaro.
Okay,
Without
and
it, I would not even love cars. We moved to East Texas area when I was 9,
uh-huh.
and while waiting on our apartment or our house to finish being built, we lived in an apartment complex, and a 96 or 97, I'm ashamed to not know the exact year because they're very differentiable on the outside, but a 96 or 97 Camaro was parked outside of our apartment every
All
day,
right.
and I had to know more about it. I asked my mom about it. We went and got it's a big hardback book about like this. I still have it to
Uh-huh.
this day about everything Camaro from 1967 and beyond. And yeah, Chevy
Very
Camaro.
cool. Very cool. Actually, one of our analysts, Robbie DeGraff, he has a third gen Camaro. His, I think, is a '01 or an '02, so it's a later model of that generation that you saw in your apartment parking lot.
Yeah.
And yeah, cool car.
Yeah, to the point where my first vehicle, I really wanted a 91 or a 92, very boxy, but Z28 of the.
Oh yeah, well, it's
I,
an icon.
yes. All right. Speaking of that, especially given your two vehicles in your garage now, do you favor new or classic?
Well,
Because cars are just
it,
so daggum good now.
they are. I guess for me, I'm inclined to go classic, and the reason is, as with you, working in the business that we do, we do get access to test cars. We do drive the latest and greatest vehicles and all that. So in that sense, I kind of get my fill of, you know, what's the latest and greatest, just through the cars that people like you and me are able to
Mhm.
test. So for what I choose to drive personally, maybe it's also a function of me getting older too. It's funny, when I was younger, I'd always kind of notice, yeah, old people like classic cars. Well,
Right.
I guess I'm that guy now. So
Sign
I
of good
I
taste.
yeah. So I've ever since I was a kid, I always loved that generation of Mercedes. It was the W123, as it's known among, within Mercedes and among, Mercedes geeks. Oftentimes, that car is such a enjoyable antidote to all the technology and modernity of, cars today, which of course I love and appreciate. But sometimes it's just kind of great to, leave all that tech behind and get into something that's so completely analog, like that Benz. That car is so analog that if there were an EMP, electromagnetic pulse that wiped out all the electronics in the local area, that thing would keep running because it's an old school
Right.
diesel. It doesn't need a spark to keep running. It'll just kind of run indefinitely as long as the fuel's there. So, but in any case, I digress. It's for me personally classic.
Okay. Transitions very well into what do you feel is the most exciting car either in the market today or at least revealed with an expected delivery date?
Ooh, that's a good question because there are so many new and interesting vehicles that are coming out in the next couple of years. I mean, just looking at what GM was showing virtually at CES. I mean, it's a perfect example of, some of the new and exciting stuff that's coming. I mean, a fully electric Silverado with over 600 horsepower, and that's neat.
And
That's
400 miles of range. Like that is the
Yeah,
magic
400 miles of range.
number for me that I'm like,
Yeah,
all right, you have my attention.
yeah. I mean, gosh, I mean, there's so much cool stuff like that. But let's see. I so I'm not going to give a specific, instead of giving you a specific vehicle, I'm going to kind of give a genre. That genre being EVs from the various startups that are popping up. I think one of the most interesting things happening in our industry right now is the fact that there are so many new players coming in all at once. I mean, the auto industry for a long time has been considered a very mature industry with very established players. I mean, GM, Ford, Toyota, and so on. I mean, they've been around forever, and they're going to be around forever. And right, but with these startups coming in, I mean, they're sort of emboldened by the success last decade of Tesla. Tesla's success last decade basically,
Pave the way.
um, paved the way for others to come in and try their hand at it too. Tesla proved that a completely new and unknown brand can indeed come into the U.S. marketplace and make some huge waves successfully. So now we've got all these startups that are attempting similar success. I guarantee you that not all of them will make it. There are too many of these
Right.
startups to too many of these EV startups to support what I think EV demand will be in the coming years. But at the same time, I mean, gosh, it is exciting to see all this new blood coming in. It's like Canoe, who's that? Fisker, wow,
So it's
who's it?
interesting that you bring up Canoe because that is the one I was most excited to see in person at the LA Auto Show.
Yeah,
They're
yeah,
they're just so out there. It's a
so out there.
bean. It looks like
Yeah,
the Toyota Previa, but cool.
yeah, yeah. I think what's really neat about the Canoe is that having an electric powertrain allows for completely different proportions in a car. You don't have to package an engine and a fuel tank and a drive shaft and all these other things that ICE powered vehicles all have to have. So that allows the designer considerable freedom to do something completely wacky and wild and different. To date, almost virtually all the EVs that we've seen in the marketplace still look like traditional gasoline cars. I mean, even a Tesla, these are vehicles coming from an exclusively EV brand. But if you didn't know that it was an EV, and if you didn't know, if you were unaware of the Tesla brand, there's nothing about the way that a Tesla looks that tells you, oh, this is not powered by a gasoline
Right.
engine. I mean, it still looks like they still look like traditional vehicles. Everything coming from GM and Ford and Hyundai and Kia, these all a lot of neat vehicles, but they still do look like familiar vehicles. They have familiar shapes. The Canoe is just wild. I mean, it's just just throws all that out the window, and they've designed a vehicle that completely takes advantage of the fact that it's an EV. And doesn't have to package all this stuff that a traditional car has to package. So, yeah, I'm excited about that one too. It's very very neat, very interesting. So yeah.
All right, we'll kind of go into a lightning round here. Do
All
you
right.
prefer on your vehicles color or grayscale?
Color.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Def, def, Definitely color. I think I think that the color palette on modern cars is pretty boring. I mean, that it makes me really happy when I see Ford do a grabber blue, or it's like, yes, here's some color. I love it.
Even the little
Uh,
Trailblazer in that teal color that Chevys have.
Yeah, yeah. It's just like we've spent. Cars are getting more and more expensive. If I've plunked down all this money on a car, I mean, why wouldn't I? At least for me, why wouldn't I want some cool color on it rather than just some silver or beige and just have it blend into the parking lot, where I'm never going to find it after I come out of the store. Yeah, color by all the way.
Do you hand wash your vehicles or take them through a drive-through?
Both. The Subaru goes to the drive-through. The Benz gets hand washed.
I approve. I approve. Let's see here. Favorite road trip snack?
Ooh, that's a good one because our family we spend a lot of time on the road. We're big road trippers, which means yes, road snacks are a thing. So because it's so frequently a thing, now I gotta figure out how to narrow it down. I guess if I'm gonna have to narrow it down to one thing, I'm probably gonna have to say gummy bears, but very specifically, they have to be Haribo gummy
Yeah,
bears.
absolutely. Are there any other brands?
No, no, it's Haribo or nothing.
Right. All right. Final question of random misfire. Favorite car movie?
Favorite car movie? Okay, let's see. I'm gonna. Oh gosh, this is a tough one. Um, I guess I'm gonna go with my gut because when you said it, the first thing that came into my mind was Bullet.
Okay.
Um, so I'm just gonna have to go with my first reaction because the first reaction is usually the
Right.
most best accurate one. So I'm gonna have to go with Bullet. That iconic chase scene is, just it never gets old to me.
Right.
Uh, Everything from the visuals to the sounds, especially. I mean, the sounds are just.
You don't get that in an EV.
Oh yeah, you don't get that in EV. Yeah, I mean the sounds are just absolutely intoxicating. The stunts are awesome. The fact that Steve McQueen himself did a lot of the driving himself, harkens back to a time that's past. I mean,
Right.
we don't usually have the headline actors doing their own stunts anymore, but Steve McQueen did back then, and I think that's awesome. That movie as a kid, ignited a particular love for the 67 to 68 fastback Mustang, which to this day remains one of my favorite car designs of all time. There've been a lot of great Mustangs through the years, but that 67 68 fastback, hands down my favorite. Yeah, they're such a that chase scene is done with such a, with such style, and even if it's not the most realistic car chase. I mean, obviously, 7 hubcaps fly off the Charger, and there's only 4 wheels, but who cares? I mean, for visual entertainment value and visuals and
Right.
sounds, I don't know, I can't beat that one.
All right. Well, I've got a couple more questions for you behind the paywall, but that does it for now. For our listeners, how can they find you? What would be relevant for our listeners to see? Because I know you get press vehicles as well.
Mm-hmm.
How would our listeners best follow what you do?
I'm on all the social media channels, except TikTok. Haven't gone there just yet. On Twitter, you can find me at my handle there is Ekimap. So it's EKIMAP. So it's my first initial, last name, and AP for AutoPacific. So Ekimap, EKIMAP. On Instagram, you can find me at Ed Kim Sees That. Again, that's Ed Kim Sees That. And then our company, if you work for a car company or a product planner, or work for a supplier or an agency, and you're interested in some of our services, you can also find me at www.autopacific.com.
All right. Well, I thank you so much for coming on and talking. This has been brewing in my brain for a long time, and just trying to find a good time to sit down and interview you. It seemed so perfect that you assumed this new role that I had to reach out and say, come on, man.
Well, I really, really appreciate you having me on the show. I mean, this was a ton of fun. I mean, there's nothing more fun for me than blabbing cars with another car enthusiast. So, I really thank you for having me come on the show. I really appreciate it.
Well, thank you. All right. So I'm just incredibly grateful to get to speak to Ed and tap into his knowledge, his history, a little bit of what he does. His job just sounds so much fun to me outside of what I'm doing. If I was not doing this, I would want to be doing that. And you can see why. Numbers are my thing, cars are my thing. So to put the two together, it's why I like baseball so much. It's numbers and sports. So yeah, he and I could have talked much longer about a great many things, but I am so grateful for him joining with me today. We didn't even touch on the thing that really actually brought us together in the first place. He and I are both members of a running group on Facebook for people in the automotive industry. And I will say, shout out Ed, thank you so much. He is one of the most outspokenly positive and supporting people in said running group that I just truly appreciate the camaraderie we've built there. He's always one of the first to comment on any of my runs, and let's face it, I'm not where I want to be, but his encouragement keeps me going. So I'm incredibly grateful for that. I'm incredibly grateful for the connection that we have made, and that he was able to come on to this week's episode of the podcast. That being said, you know where to find us, where to find what we're driving, what we're doing. We're on Facebook and Instagram, both at GT Garage Talk, and everything we do can be found at gtgaragetalk.com. Until next time, bye.